Okay, don't have this right. Okay. Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. It's your girl Lori. Listen, I know that there's lighting here and that's like YouTube taboo, like no lights here, but I like it right now and it gets dark earlier, so it's good for my mental health. So you guys just gonna have to deal with some of that glare. Sorry. So I want to talk to you guys about obsessive thinking. First of all, what is it? Right? Because we all have things. We all have things. We all have things about things. We all have thoughts about things that you're like, man, if I'd have done this different, or man, what if this happens? Those are typical standard behavior. Like those are thoughts that's normal. This is specifically for people who totally overthink things. And I don't mean just like, should I do gray or blue? Gray or blue? That's not what I mean. So let me first explain. And how can I talk about this? Well, I am an alternative therapist. What's an alternative therapist? Think therapy with alternative, holistic type things. So traditional therapy, but I also include like crystals and meditation and kind of Eastern and Western medicine. It just kind of works for me. And I, all my life, have suffered from anxiety, depressions, obsessive thinking. Oh, the list is endless. Insomnia, right? So as I was going through that and just seeing everything and knowing the mental health issues in my family for many, many, many years ago, it's something that I said, okay, well, I have two choices. I can either continue to sort of victimize myself, you know, like, woe is me, I don't know how to function, I'll never be happy. No judgment. I've been there, right? Been there. And it's hard. And I knew that that really wasn't working for me. I'll be 50 in April. I knew that just wasn't working for me and there had to be something else. Now, that being said, I also do take holistic and regular meds for my anxiety because sometimes it's even higher than normal. And I noticed that my cycles come in certain times. So my cycles, like right now I've been in I'm out of a cycle. And it was more of like it felt lazy, but laziness isn't a thing. That comes from something else too. So let's talk obsessive thinking. When you are thinking of past stuff, let's say you broke up with somebody or you had a conversation and you're like, oh my God, why did I have that conversation? And then you sit in your brain and you keep playing it out and you play out a different scenario and you play out a different scenario and you can see the conversation unfolding and you do all of those things and you can feel it. And then you think about, well, then this would have happened, then that would have happened. So you kind of become a storyteller or a movie writer, script writer, and you go down this big path. Well, when you do that, you're also skewing what the truth is. So the truth is that's done. Logically, you know this. You're like, done, can't change this, great. Like, I understand it. But here's the thing. When that's happening, I need you to know that that's okay, but it's teaching you something. So if you're obsessing typically on rumination, which is past stuff, typically linked with depression, you don't always have to have depression, but it's a standard typically in the rumination part of it. And when you have that, you have to realize that there's a deeper issue. It's not just because you had a conversation and it went awry and you could have done something different. It is typically, it could be many other reasons, but typically value of other people's opinions over yourself. So if you're valuing how somebody else feels about you or you don't want them to feel some certain kind of way, like, I don't want this person not to like me. Like if all of those things are happening for you, it's a deep issue, right? Because then you want somebody else's validation to show your worth, where it's the other way around, right? So typically, you're badass, right? You're awesome. Doesn't mean you always have to believe it, but you're awesome. So somebody else is going to have a specific story about you, and that's their story. You have to understand, it's like when you read a book. You're going to read a book, you're going to picture the characters one way. The writer may have them looking a totally different way. So, but your perception's your reality. So you're not going to be able to necessarily change somebody else's opinions, nor should you. Okay. Now, what if you're thinking about the things that you're like, man, what's going to happen in the election? What's going to happen at the job? What's going to happen? Am I going to get married? Am I going to have children? Like you're way down the road, right? It's good to have goals. It's good to set your kind of like vision boards. Yeah, we want you to do that. But when you're obsessing on it, or if you're like, well, when I go in on Monday, I'm going to say this to this person and then this person's going to react to it. Or, well, what if this happens? Well, what if that happens? Okay, so how I approach that is, okay, what if that does happen? Great, let's worst case scenario it. Oh, and by the way, that's attached to anxiety. That anticipation is anxiety. They typically go hand in hand, all right? So sometimes people constantly anticipate forward, constantly anticipate back. 99.9% of the times, they go together. You can't hit the lottery, but you got that. So let's talk about that. It's not an overnight fix. So we want to get to the root of what the concern is. Typically, that's control. Okay, so because you can't control a certain outcome, you want it to be a certain way. You don't have the power to change somebody else. That's all control. And control is all part of another different center, and we'll talk about that in another video. Oh, by the way, if this type of, if you want to know more about it, consider subscribing and hitting the bell in the corner for notification. You'll get notified every time I post. But yeah, so it is very much attached to that control center. Ideally, the magic cure is to stay present. Stay today, not yesterday, not tomorrow, not 5 minutes from now, not 5 minutes ago. This is not to say I want you to fight it. That's a whole other thing. I don't want you fighting through your anxieties or your stressors. I don't want you to do that. I don't. I want you to let that come, but I don't want you to feed it per se. But I always recommend writing it down into like a journal or something, or just a note. It doesn't have to be all grammatically correct. Writing it down, because a lot of times you're going to judge yourself of feeling that way because now you've also created that. And remember that your brain believes what you're feeding it. So it's not, the brain is smart, but it's only smart as what you feed it. So what you're telling it is what it's going to believe. So if you're playing out all these scenarios, especially the one going forward, because the one going backwards, you have sort of a point of reference to start it. The one going forward, you're like, okay, well, what if this happens? This is going to suck. Okay, well, what if it happens? Well, you're going to figure it out, right? Like typically we figure out we as humans, we find that survival mechanism. We don't love it, but we find it. So I wanted to hop on again, kind of give you the idea of what obsessive thinking is, why it's attached to typically attached to other mental illnesses, but it does fall under OCD. So it is part of obsessive compulsive. Anything that you do repetitively is obsessive compulsive. So this is just obsessive thinking, which is all part of OCD. Don't get all tangled up in the label of what it is. I'm going to try to give you some tips and help, but please, please, please comment below and tell me what you struggle with the most and what you would like to see videos on. I will definitely try. And at the end of this, you can see links to my other social media. Stay safe, stay healthy, be kind to yourself. It's okay. We'll get through this.